They say family is supposed to be your safe place, your anchor when life gets rough. But in my case, my own family became the storm that nearly sank me. My name is Evelyn. I am 63 years old, and 6 months ago, I gave up everything I had to help my son and his wife build their dream life. I sold the last piece of security I owned, my home, the house where I had raised Michael as a single mother, the house my late husband and I had poured our sweat and love into. I sold it to give my son and his wife Claire the down payment they needed. Michael promised me it was temporary, just until they were steady, just until they got back on their feet. So I moved into the small spare room in their house. I cooked their meals. I cleaned their messes. I even helped pay part of the bills with the small pension I received each month. Clara was pregnant. She needed help, and I gave her everything I could. Day and night, I worked like a servant inside that house. When she couldn't bend to tie her shoes, I was there. When she was too tired to cook, I made sure dinner was on the table. When she had mood swings and snapped, I stayed quiet, swallowing my pride, reminding myself it was for family. But the truth, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I was treated like a burden, like a shadow in their home that they were tired of seeing. Clara barely spoke to me unless it was to give orders. Michael, my own son, began avoiding me, as if I embarrassed him in front of her. I heard them whispering behind closed doors. I heard her complaining that I was always in the way. I heard him agreeing. One evening, Clara sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, her nails clicking against the screen, her face lit by the glow. She didn't even look at me when she said the words that broke me in half. I don't want a useless old woman here while I'm pregnant. Her voice was sharp, dismissive, like I was some broken appliance they couldn't wait to throw out. And my son, my Michael, he nodded in agreement. Something inside me shattered like glass hitting concrete. You should find a new place to live, Mom, he added, his voice cold, like he was asking about the weather, not like he was tearing my heart apart. I stared at him, my own flesh and blood. The boy I had raised by working 2 jobs, the boy I had fed with my own hands, the boy whose shoes I bought secondhand so he wouldn't go barefoot, the boy I had stayed up with when he had nightmares. And this was my reward. Where exactly am I supposed to go? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake. That's not our problem, Dorothy. Clara finally looked up, her eyes icy cold. We need that room for the baby's nursery. Michael shifted uncomfortably. There are senior communities, Mom. Nice places. You'll meet people your age. My age. Like 63 was ancient. Like I should be discarded the way people throw away old furniture. I looked at them both, the 2 people who had benefited from my sacrifices more than anyone else in the world. The 2 people who should have been protecting me. Instead, they were throwing me away. But here's the thing about being underestimated all your life. You learn to keep your cards close to your chest. And I had cards they didn't know about. Fine, I said calmly. I'll be out by the weekend. Clara smirked like she had won. Michael looked relieved. Neither of them noticed the small smile at the corner of my lips. The smile of a woman who had just decided her next move. They thought they had defeated me. They thought I was powerless. But they were wrong. Very wrong. The weekend came faster than I thought. Each day inside that house felt like walking on broken glass. Clara ordered me around like I was her maid. Michael avoided my eyes, and I quietly packed my bags in the little spare room I had once called home. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't just packing clothes. I was preparing something far bigger, something they would never see coming. You see, when I sold my house, I didn't just hand over the entire down payment. I gave them enough to close the deal, yes, but I didn't tell them about the money I kept aside, a good portion of it, hidden safely in an account under my name only. I had learned the hard way never to put all your trust, or all your money, into anyone else's hands, not even family. Michael and Clara thought I had given them everything. They thought I was broke and dependent on them. That was their first mistake. The second mistake? They underestimated just how deeply betrayal fuels a woman who has nothing left to lose. The day I moved out, Michael carried my last box to the curb. He didn't hug me. He didn't thank me. He just muttered, "Take care, Mom," and walked back inside before Clara even waved goodbye. I stood there with my suitcase and that single cardboard box, alone, rejected, but not defeated. That night, instead of going to some sad little senior apartment like they expected, I checked into a modest but clean extended stay hotel. I used my hidden savings to pay for a month up front, and for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Because I had a plan. I started small. I began reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to in years, old friends, old neighbors, even distant relatives. Everyone had a story about Michael and Clara, stories of arrogance, entitlement, and debts they had never repaid. One neighbor told me Clara had bragged about how she tricked the old woman into giving up her house. Another mentioned how Michael never paid back the loan he borrowed to start his first job. Piece by piece, I collected every bit of information. I also visited my lawyer, the same man who had helped me close the sale of my house. I asked him to pull up the mortgage papers for Michael's new home. I wanted to know everything, every loophole, every weakness. And when I read the documents, I smiled, because I had just discovered something that would change everything. The house wasn't solely in Michael's name. It was under both his and Clara's. And Clara, despite her smug little attitude, hadn't contributed a single penny to the down payment. The only documented proof of where that money came from, me. My lawyer explained it carefully. Legally, I could file a claim. I could argue that the down payment was a loan, not a gift, and if a court sided with me, the house could be forced into sale to repay me, meaning they could lose everything. But I didn't want to rush into court right away. No revenge tastes better when it's slow cooked, so instead, I decided to let them believe they had won. I kept my distance. I didn't call. I didn't show up. I became invisible in their lives. Meanwhile, I carefully prepared my evidence. Every bank transfer, every receipt, every message where Michael had promised, "It's temporary, Mom, we'll pay you back," all neatly filed, ready to be presented when the time came. But I wasn't only planning on legal revenge. Oh no, I wanted them to feel the sting socially too. Clara loved her reputation. She wanted to be seen as the perfect expectant mother, the generous hostess, the successful young woman married to her mother's darling boy. But I began planting seeds. Little whispers here and there in the community, at church, at the market, with the very neighbors she wanted to impress. I never outright lied. I just told the truth, that I had sold my house to help them, that I was living in a small rental because they didn't want me around, that Clara had called me a useless old woman. The looks people gave me, the gasps, the head shakes, I knew those whispers would reach them sooner or later, and still, I waited, because the baby was due soon. And when that child arrived, I knew Michael and Clara would need me again. They would expect me to come crawling back, to help, to cook, to clean, to babysit. But by then, the ground beneath their feet would already be cracking. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was building it carefully, brick by brick, so that when it finally collapsed, it would bury them whole. The weeks passed quietly, too quietly. Michael and Clara thought I had vanished from their world. But I was watching from the shadows, and every day that passed brought me closer to the moment I had been waiting for. The baby arrived on a rainy Sunday morning. I found out not because they told me, but because a neighbor mentioned it after church. I nodded politely, pretending to be happy, but inside, my heart twisted. They hadn't even called me. No message, no photo, nothing. After everything I had given, after all the sacrifices, I was still nothing more than a discarded piece of furniture to them. But life has a way of turning tables. 2 weeks later, I received the call I knew would come. It was Michael. His voice was tight, stressed, desperate. "Mom, Clara's exhausted. The baby won't sleep. We need help." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I let silence hang in the air for a long moment before I answered. "I'm sorry, Michael," I said softly, "but I can't. I'm not welcome in your home, remember?" He stammered, "Mom, please." That was Clara. She didn't mean it. "We just need you right now." But the truth was clear. They hadn't wanted me before. They wanted me now only because I was useful again. And that, to me, was the final insult. I told him I'd think about it. But the moment I hung up, I called my lawyer. It was time to stop waiting. It was time to strike. Within days, the paperwork was filed. A legal claim asserting that my contribution to the down payment had been a loan, not a gift. The evidence was strong. Michael's texts promising to pay me back, the bank transfers directly from my account, even notes I had made during the sale. Every detail supported my side. The court issued notice. Michael and Clara were officially served, and the silence that followed was deafening. For 2 whole weeks, I heard nothing. Then one evening, my phone rang. Again. This time it wasn't Michael. It was Clara. Her voice was dripping with venom. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you try to take away our home? After everything we've done for you." I almost dropped the phone from laughing. Done for me? What exactly had they done for me? I told her calmly, Clara, the court will decide what's fair. And then I ended the call before she could spit more poison. But that call told me everything I needed to know. The cracks in their perfect little world were finally showing. The whispers in the neighborhood had reached them. The court papers had shaken them. And the pressure of a newborn was breaking them down further. And I was only getting started. A week later, I made my move in public. I attended church, dressed neatly, holding a small gift bag for the baby. When people asked, I smiled sadly and said, I haven't met my grandchild yet. Michael and Clara haven't invited me. The gasps, the pitying looks, the whispers that spread like wildfire through the congregation, those were my weapons. Clara thrived on appearances, and I had just shattered her image in front of the very people whose approval she craved. By the next Sunday, the pastor himself pulled me aside. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said gently, we'll be praying for reconciliation. But I could see the concern in his eyes. The judgment was already forming against Michael and Clara. Meanwhile, my lawyer informed me that Michael had tried to argue in court that the money was a gift. But the evidence was too strong. The judge had scheduled a hearing, and if they couldn't prove otherwise, they risked losing everything. When Michael finally showed up at my hotel, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Mom, please, he whispered, you're going to ruin us. We'll lose the house. The baby needs stability. Clara needs rest. And for a moment, my heart softened. He was still my son, after all. The little boy I had once carried on my hip, the child I had stayed up nights with when he had fevers. But then I remembered the look on his face when he nodded while Clara called me useless. I remembered the way he had said, you should find a new place to live, Mom. Like I was nothing. And my heart hardened again. You made your choice, Michael, I said quietly. Now you have to live with it. He begged, he pleaded, he even knelt in front of me like a child. But I didn't bend. Not this time. Because the turning point had come, and there was no going back. The court hearing loomed closer with every passing day. Michael and Clara tried to keep up appearances, but the cracks were showing more clearly. Now, the neighbors whispered, friends stopped visiting, and even their social media, once filled with smiling photos, had grown silent. Meanwhile, I kept moving my pieces quietly, carefully. I wasn't shouting, I wasn't arguing, I was simply letting justice take its course, and that was far more terrifying to them than any confrontation could ever be. The night before the hearing, I received another call. This time it was Michael again. He sounded broken, more broken than I had ever heard him. Mom, he whispered, please, Claire's losing it. She cries all night. The baby cries all night, and I can't keep this together. If we lose the house, I don't know what will happen to us. I let him speak. Every word was a reminder of how far they had fallen. And then I told him the truth. You should have thought of that before you betrayed me. Actions have consequences. The next morning, I arrived at court early. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pulled back neatly. When I walked into the courtroom, Michael and Clara were already seated. Clara glared at me with pure hatred. Michael just looked defeated. The judge listened patiently to both sides. Their lawyer tried to argue that my contribution had been a gift, a token of maternal love. But my lawyer laid out the evidence piece by piece: bank transfers, written notes, Michael's text messages promising repayment. The truth was undeniable. When the judge finally spoke, the words fell like thunder. There was enough evidence to proceed with a full claim. The house could, in fact, be subject to repossession if repayment wasn't made. Michael's face went pale. Clara gripped his arms so tightly her knuckles turned white, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power, not anger, not bitterness, just pure, steady power. The very power they thought I had lost when they cast me aside. The aftermath was swift. The story spread quickly through the community. People whispered at the grocery store, at church, even at Michael's workplace. Everyone knew now that the perfect couple had betrayed the very woman who gave them everything. And everyone knew they were about to lose the roof over their heads because of it. Clara tried to fight back. She posted smiling photos online, pretending everything was fine. But the comments told a different story. People weren't fooled anymore. They had seen too much. They had heard too much. Her reputation, once untouchable, was crumbling. Michael, on the other hand, grew quieter. He stopped meeting friends. He stopped going out, even at work. His colleagues noticed the change. The confident man he once pretended to be had vanished. He looked like a ghost of himself, and through it all, I stayed silent. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to argue. The law was on my side. The truth was on my side, and that was enough. One evening, as I walked home from the grocery store, I saw them, Michael and Clara, standing outside their house, arguing in hushed, but furious voices. The baby cried inside, the sound piercing through the night. Clara's face was twisted with rage, Michael's with exhaustion. They looked nothing like the golden couple they had once tried to be. For a moment, I stopped and simply watched. This was what betrayal had earned them. This was the cost of their cruelty. The next day, my lawyer called. The court had issued a timeline for repayment. Michael and Clara had only weeks to come up with the money. If they failed, the house would be repossessed, and I would finally have justice. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, not because of what they had lost, but because I had finally taken back what they had stolen from me, my dignity, my voice, my power. But the story wasn't over yet. The final act was still to come, and it would be the one that broke them completely. The deadline came faster than anyone expected. Weeks turned into days, and Michael and Clara still hadn't found a way to repay the money. Their friends had stopped lending them anything. Family members ignored their calls, and the bank refused to offer any more loans. Clara grew desperate. She screamed at Michael late into the night, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You promised this wouldn't happen. You promised we'd be safe." Her anger echoed through the walls of their once proud home. Michael, on the other hand, was unraveling quietly. He stopped shaving. He stopped eating properly. Dark circles hung under his eyes like permanent bruises. He no longer looked like my son. He looked like a man completely hollowed out by the weight of his own choices. And me, I remained calm. I had already done my part. Now I simply waited for the law to do the rest. Waiting, for once in my life, was on my side. The final hearing arrived on a gray Monday morning. Rain fell against the courthouse windows like nature itself was mourning. Michael and Clara walked in, both looking as though they hadn't slept in weeks. I followed behind them, steady, composed, ready to see this through. The judge wasted no time. Repayment had not been made. The agreement was binding. The consequences were clear. The house would be seized. Assets would be liquidated. The balance would be transferred to me. Justice at last was mine. Clara exploded first. "This is insane," she screamed, her voice shrill, bouncing off the courtroom walls. "You can't do this to us. You're his mother." But the judge silenced her with a single raised hand. This court is not interested in emotional manipulation. This court is interested in facts. Michael didn't speak. He simply stared at the ground. His shoulders slumped, as if every ounce of strength had drained from his body. I looked at him, and for a moment, my heart twisted. He was still my son, but he was also the man who had thrown me out when I needed him most, and that truth outweighed any pity I might have felt. After the ruling, they rushed outside, furious. Clara turned on me, her eyes blazing. "You ruined us. You destroyed our family." I looked her in the eye and spoke quietly. "No, Clara, you destroyed yourselves. I only made sure you couldn't bury me along with you." Michael didn't say a word. He just stood there, silent, broken. I thought he might look at me, might ask for forgiveness, might at least acknowledge what had happened. But he didn't. He simply turned away. And in that moment, I knew something inside him had snapped. News of the court ruling spread quickly. The neighbors who once admired their perfect home now whispered as they drove by. The gossip spread through town, faster than fire in dry grass. Everyone knew the truth now. Everyone knew that the golden couple had stolen from the very woman who gave them everything. Clara tried to hold on to the facade. She posted pictures online, fake smiles plastered across her face. But the comments told a different story. People weren't fooled anymore. They saw the cracks. They saw the truth. Michael retreated further into himself. He stopped going to work. He avoided calls. Even his closest friends gave up on him. He had built his entire identity on success and pride. Now that both were gone, there was nothing left. Weeks later, the house was repossessed. Michael and Clara packed their belongings into boxes, their once bright future reduced to cardboard and tape. I didn't go to watch, but I heard about it. Clara crying loudly, refusing to leave. Michael carrying boxes silently, his face like stone. They moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, far away from the neighborhood they once flaunted, far away from the life they thought they deserved. And me, I used part of the settlement to buy myself a small cottage by the lake. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every corner, every wall belonged to me. I planted flowers in the garden. I cooked meals in a kitchen that finally felt warm again. And at night, I slept peacefully, knowing no one could ever throw me out again. One evening, months after the case ended, I received a knock on my door. It was Michael, alone. He looked thinner, older, worn down by life. His eyes met mine, filled with something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe. Regret, definitely. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. No, Michael, not tonight. Some wounds don't close with words. They close with time. He lowered his head, nodded once, and walked away. I watched him disappear into the night, knowing that chapter of my life was closed. Now, when I sit on my porch and watch the sunset, I don't feel bitterness. I don't feel anger. I feel strength, because I survived betrayal. I survived being discarded, and I came out stronger on the other side. If there's one lesson my story carries, it's this: never let anyone convince you that you are powerless. Never let anyone take your dignity without a fight, because even in your darkest hour, you can rise. And when you do, the ones who tried to break you will have no choice but to watch.